Sean Diddy Combs' own lawyers describe the billionaire music mogul, currently facing serious sex trafficking charges in a New York court.
Rapper Kid Cudi leaves federal court after taking the stand at Sean Diddy Combs' racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking trial.
This is a special situation.
Today's testimony in the Sean Combs sex trafficking.
There were the AR-15 style assault rifles.
Saying that Sean Combs sent him to Whole Foods to get 1-gallon bottle of BP-free water.
The male stripper would have, or escort, would have sex with Cassie.
They were referred to me as Wild King Nights. I would have to go and prep that hotel room.
Sean Diddy Combs, already on trial for sex trafficking.
Baby oil, Astroglide, drugs. I had to clean up those rooms.
New allegations of vile behavior.
It was frightening. His eyes, they were just black.
Sean Diddy Combs, a federal agent, took the stand, giving more detail about the raid on Combs' home in Miami last March. You can see these sketches of the agent holding up the guns and the baggies of drugs, including cocaine, ketamine. There are also new pictures of that raid that were shown in court today. Pictures of cell phones in a Balenciaga boot, drugs in a Gucci bag, pills made from mushrooms, bottles of baby oil, lubes, even some rubber ducks randomly in here. And the day ended with testimony from a former Combs executive named George Kaplan.
Sean Diddy Combs, a renowned figure in the entertainment industry, is currently facing a high-profile federal trial in Manhattan. The charges against him are severe, including sex trafficking, racketeering, and obstruction of justice.
Today in Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial, a former employee gave emotional testimony about her experience with the music mogul.
Diddy's defense team employs a multifaceted strategy to counter the prosecution's case as the trial unfolds. This video delves into the various aspects of Diddy's defense tactics, providing a comprehensive overview of the legal maneuvers at play. The federal indictment against Sean Diddy Combs is not just a snapshot of a single incident. It's a sprawling, alarming narrative that paints a picture of alleged criminal activity spanning more than 20 years. The charges are not light accusations. We're talking about forced sexual acts, drug trafficking, violent intimidation, and a web of manipulation and cover-ups so complex, it has shaken both the music industry and public opinion.
Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs is in federal custody this morning. He was arrested last night in New York after being indicted by a federal grand jury. The exact charges not clear this morning, but the U.S. attorney in Manhattan expected to unseal the indictment later today.
This isn't just a scandal. It's a possible unraveling of a man once seen as a hip-hop mogul and cultural icon.
The federal government versus Sean Combs.
The largest pimp in the world disguised as a music mogul.
Predator sitting in a courtroom with a Bible.
I guarantee you it's not Diddy walking around in 8-inch platform heels.
There is no reason to own half of a Spencer store.
According to the indictment, prosecutors allege that Diddy orchestrated an organized network, a personal empire that operated under the radar for years. It wasn't just about personal misconduct, but a systematic abuse of power. The charges involve a calculated use of fame, influence, and wealth to allegedly exploit, control, and silence victims.
To New York now, where a former assistant of Sean Diddy Combs takes the stand in his sex trafficking trial.
We're talking about sex trafficking, forced labor, bribery, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice, all rolled into a decades-long cycle of alleged criminal activity. The indictment lays out a persistent and pervasive pattern of abuse, particularly targeting women, some of whom were reportedly underage at the time of the incidents. Victims and witnesses describe how women were allegedly lured in with promises of fame, luxury, or protection, only to be met with violence, coercion, and threats. These aren't isolated accounts. They're stories repeated across years, from different voices, pointing to the same man at the center. A key part of the case revolves around former employees, bodyguards, assistants, and even business associates, now cooperating with investigators. These individuals provided first-hand accounts of what they saw, what they were told to do, and how they were allegedly used to help carry out or cover up criminal behavior. Some spoke about being forced to retrieve women, escort them to hotel rooms, or dispose of surveillance equipment. Others claimed they witnessed beatings, heard screams, or were tasked with destroying evidence after incidents. One employee reportedly testified that they were told to make problems disappear. Another described bribes being paid to silence accusers or to prevent damaging footage from being leaked. Several sources say they feared for their lives if they spoke up, an intimidation tactic that allegedly kept people quiet for years. In some cases, prosecutors say there were even retaliation attempts against those who tried to leave or expose what was happening.
Diddy carried his drugs in a Louis Vuitton toiletry bag, according to Dawn Richard.
She testified there was a guy that would come by with all the drugs, whatever he needed. His name is One Stop, or he went by One Stop.
The drug element of the indictment adds another disturbing layer. The federal documents allege that Diddy used a network to distribute illicit substances, both for personal use and to coerce or control others. Victims were allegedly drugged without their consent in some instances, rendering them vulnerable and unable to resist. This ties directly into the forced sexual acts mentioned in the charges. It paints a chilling picture of a man who allegedly used narcotics not just for partying, but as a weapon of control. Then there's the physical evidence, where it gets even more serious. Raids on Diddy's properties earlier this year revealed electronic devices, documents, hidden camera footage, and other physical material that prosecutors are using to build their case. While much of the evidence remains sealed from the public, sources close to the investigation say some of the findings were devastating. They include alleged video recordings of non-consensual acts, secret surveillance systems, and encrypted communication between Diddy and his inner circle. The obstruction of justice charges are especially critical. Prosecutors say that Diddy used his financial power over the years to delay, deflect, or derail investigations. He allegedly paid off accusers, manipulated legal documents, and even hired hackers to erase digital trails. Multiple shell companies and offshore accounts were used to move money around discreetly, raising concerns about money laundering. Legal experts say this is one of recent most comprehensive celebrity indictments. It reads more like an organized crime case than a celebrity scandal, and it could potentially set a precedent. If found guilty, Diddy could face decades in federal prison, not to mention massive civil lawsuits, financial ruin, and a permanent stain on his legacy. But beyond the headlines and celebrity gossip lies a much deeper issue, a reckoning for the industry. How did this go unnoticed for so long? How many people turned a blind eye? And how many victims suffered in silence, thinking they had no way out? This case is still unfolding, but one thing is clear. The justice system is now paying attention. If the charges hold up in court, this could be the moment when power, privilege, and protection finally collide with accountability. Diddy's defense is led by seasoned attorneys Mark Agnifilo and Brian Steele. Agnifilo is known for his experience in high-profile cases, while Steele recently defended rapper Young Thug in a lengthy racketeering trial.
Sean Diddy Combs is making changes to his legal team with the help of a veteran Atlanta defense attorney, Brian Steele. Steele recently represented rapper Young Thug in the YSL RICO trial. New court documents show Steele has requested permission to practice in the Southern and Eastern districts of New York to appear as counsel for Combs.
Their combined expertise is central to formulating a robust defense strategy. Additionally, Mark Garagos, a famed criminal defense attorney, is advising Diddy at the onset of his trial. However, Judge Aaron Subramanian admonished Garagos for commenting about the case and the prosecution on a podcast, which the judge deemed could impede the fairness of the trial. A central pillar of Sean Diddy Combs' defense strategy is a rigorous examination of the prosecution's evidence, aiming to challenge its admissibility and credibility. His legal team contends that certain materials, including digital files and witness testimonies, may have been obtained unlawfully or are inherently unreliable. They argue that some evidence was collected through overbroad search warrants that lacked sufficient probable cause and omitted exculpatory information, thereby violating Combs' constitutional rights. Specifically, the defense has filed motions to suppress evidence obtained from raids on Combs' properties, asserting that the warrants were unconstitutionally broad and failed to disclose potential biases of key witnesses, such as Producer 1, whose credibility they question.
I'm outside Diddy's $40 million pad. It's quiet now, but yesterday, media, SWAT vehicles, dozens of armed officials and investigators descended on the property, seizing boxes of evidence and putting his sons Christian and Justin in handcuffs. They were reportedly detained and released. So what does this raid mean for Diddy and any evidence against him?
During these raids, authorities seized various items.
25 bottles of baby oil, 31 bottles of Astroglide.
Illegal objection. Ew.
Including narcotics, over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant, and 3 AR-15 rifles with defaced serial numbers. The prosecution interprets these findings as indicative of a criminal enterprise involving sex trafficking and coercion. However, the defense contends that the presence of such items does not conclusively prove criminal activity, and that their portrayal by the prosecution is an overreach. They argue that the items were used in consensual adult activities, and that the prosecution's narrative unfairly criminalizes private behavior. Moreover, the defense has raised concerns about the seizure of materials from Combs's jail cell, claiming that prosecutors accessed attorney-client privileged documents, including a 19-page to-do list containing sensitive defense-related information. They argue that this constitutes a violation of Combs' Sixth Amendment rights and has compromised the fairness of the trial.
And the judge in Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial is expected to decide this morning whether to throw out a portion of last week's testimony.
In response, a judge has barred prosecutors from using these seized papers in court proceedings. The defense also challenges the credibility of key witnesses, suggesting that some may have personal grievances or financial incentives to fabricate their testimonies. For instance, they question the motivations of individuals who have entered into financial settlements or have had contentious relationships with Combs. By highlighting these potential biases, the defense aims to cast doubt on the reliability of the prosecution's narrative. The defense has raised concerns about potential government misconduct. They allege that sensitive information was leaked to the media, potentially biasing public opinion and the jury pool. They also claim that law enforcement employed aggressive tactics during property raids, which could be perceived as prejudicial.
It was a day filled with testimony about guns and drugs in the trial against Sean Diddy Combs. A federal agent took the stand, giving more detail about the raid on Combs' home in Miami last March. You can see these sketches of the agent holding up the guns and the baggies of drugs, including cocaine, ketamine. There are also new pictures of that raid that were shown in court today. Pictures of cell phones in a Balenciaga boot, drugs in a Gucci bag, pills made from mushrooms, bottles of baby oil, lubes, even some rubber ducks randomly in here. And the day ended with testimony from a former Combs executive named George Kaplan.
For instance, federal agents raided Combs' Miami property in March 2024, recovering evidence such as dismantled and defaced AR-15 rifle parts, a loaded handgun, drugs including cocaine, ketamine, and ecstasy pills bearing the Tesla logo, and personal items like sex toys and high heels. During the investigation, authorities discovered a 19-page to-do list, allegedly containing sensitive defense-related information. The defense contends that this document was protected under attorney-client privilege, and that its exposure gives the prosecution an unfair advantage. Prosecutors argue that the list indicates attempts to obstruct justice. Sean Diddy Combs has faced multiple denials of bail as he awaits trial on serious federal charges, including sex trafficking and racketeering. Despite offering a substantial $50 million bond and proposing stringent conditions such as 24/7 home confinement, the courts have consistently denied his release. Judges cite the risk of witness tampering and obstruction of justice as the primary concern. Combs remains incarcerated at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a federal facility known for housing high-profile detainees. His trial commenced on May 5, 2025, with opening statements and witness testimonies beginning on May 12th. The proceedings have included testimonies from former associates and employees, shedding light on the allegations against him. Prosecutors have presented evidence suggesting Combs attempted to influence witnesses and obstruct the investigation, including unauthorized communications while in custody.
We begin tonight with explosive claims from Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial. A woman who worked for Diddy for more than a decade, testifying, corroborating other testimony with accounts of kidnappings and death threats and even an armed break-in. Pick 7's Anthony DiLorenzo was in the courtroom and breaks down today's events.
These actions have reinforced the court's decision to deny bail, emphasizing the importance of ensuring the integrity of the judicial process. Combs continues to contest the charges as the trial progresses, maintaining his innocence. The outcome of this high-profile case remains to be seen, with significant implications for all parties involved. Central to the prosecution's case are the shocking allegations that Sean Diddy Combs organized secretive and disturbing events often referred to as freak-offs. According to federal prosecutors, these gatherings weren't just lavish private parties. They allege these events involved illegal activities, including coerced sex acts, drug use, and even violence. Some testimonies claim that women were forced or manipulated into performing sexual acts under the influence of drugs or due to fear of retaliation. The term freak-offs has quickly become a buzzword in court and across media platforms because of its sinister context and the disturbing descriptions surrounding it. Prosecutors argue that these events weren't occasional or isolated. They describe a recurring pattern taking place over many years, involving a rotating group of young women, some allegedly trafficked or groomed, who were forced to engage in explicit sexual behavior with high-profile guests. These events were said to be highly organized, with roles assigned to staff, security, and even recruiters. Some witnesses claim that phones were confiscated at the door, and the properties were under tight surveillance to ensure secrecy. According to the government, Diddy maintained control through power, influence, and threats. These tactics, they argue, created an environment where consent was essentially impossible. However, the defense strongly disputes this narrative. Diddy's legal team claims the prosecution is twisting private and consensual adult behavior into something criminal. They acknowledge that the events in question happened in a very different context. The defense paints them as extravagant adult parties, where guests voluntarily participated and understood the nature of the events. According to the defense, these were not crimes, but private affairs among consenting adults. One of the defense's primary strategies is to question the definition and perception of consent. They argue that just because these events were sexual and involved substances like alcohol or cannabis, it doesn't automatically make them criminal. They assert that no individuals involved were held against their will or forced to perform acts they disagreed with. The defense claims that the government is trying to criminalize behavior that falls outside of societal norms, but is not illegal when it involves informed, consensual adults. To back this up, Combs' lawyers plan to bring several former guests and participants to the stand. These individuals, they say, will testify that they attended freak-off events willingly, were never coerced, and did not witness any criminal activity. Some are expected to describe the parties as wild but voluntary, adding that people knew what they were signing up for and participated out of their own free will.
The defense naturally is trying to poke holes sort of in some of the earlier testimony that Sean Combs was always the person in control.
The defense hopes this testimony will directly contradict the prosecution's portrayal and show that many claims are exaggerated, false, or motivated by personal vendettas. Furthermore, the defense is prepared to dig into the backgrounds of key accusers. They are expected to suggest that some witnesses testifying for the prosecution have financial motives, such as pending civil lawsuits, book deals, or media contracts. Others may be dealing with personal grudges, or may have altered their stories over time. In one example already submitted to the court, a woman who initially denied being harmed at one of these events is now claiming victimhood after hiring a high-profile attorney. The defense sees this as a red flag and plans to use it to create doubt about the credibility of such claims. Another argument Combs' attorneys raises is the cultural and legal difference between immoral and illegal. They stress that the law does not punish someone just because they have unusual tastes or live an extravagant lifestyle, even if the public or the jury finds Diddy's private life to be outrageous or distasteful. They remind the court that this isn't enough to prove criminal wrongdoing. They argue that the prosecution relies heavily on moral outrage to build a case that lacks hard evidence of coercion or criminal conduct. The defense has also pointed out potential issues with how evidence related to these freak-off events was collected. They claim that some of the video footage used by prosecutors was taken without proper warrants or was edited misleadingly.
Diddy's ex was grilled on the stand today over their so-called freak-offs. That's Cassie Ventura this morning, 9 months pregnant and surrounded by security as she headed here to federal court to be cross-examined. Inside, Diddy's defense attorney focused on some of the extremely graphic text messages they exchanged, suggesting Cassie not only helped plan the alleged drug-fueled sex parties, but also enjoyed them.
Other digital materials, such as text messages or emails, are being contested for authenticity and context. The defense is pushing to dismiss some of these pieces of evidence, arguing that without them, the prosecution's story loses much of its impact. The courtroom battle over these allegations is expected to be intense. Legal experts believe that the case may ultimately hinge on how the jury interprets the idea of consent, coercion, and credibility. If Diddy's defense team can convince jurors that these were adults acting on their own free will, even in unusual settings, they might succeed in dismantling a significant part of the case. Clinical psychologist Dawn Hughes has testified for the prosecution.
And in New York City, the jury is hearing testimony from a forensic and clinical psychologist, Dr. Dawn Hughes, in the Sean Diddy Combs trafficking trial in federal court.
Explaining the psychological complexities of abusive relationships, her insights aim to provide context for the victim's experiences and behaviors. Hughes highlighted how economic control can trap victims and hinder them from reporting abuse. The defense may counter this with their own expert witnesses to challenge these interpretations. If convicted, Diddy faces imprisonment and the potential loss of significant assets, including luxury properties and business holdings. The prosecution may argue that these assets were acquired illegally, making them subject to forfeiture. This could have profound implications for Combs' legacy and the broader music industry. The defense aims to portray Diddy as a victim of a media-driven campaign and overzealous prosecution. They argue that the charges are exaggerated and that the evidence lacks the necessary weight to support the severe allegations. By challenging the credibility of witnesses and the legality of evidence collection, they seek to create reasonable doubt. Additionally, the defense has filed a motion arguing that the case is unprecedented and that no white person has ever been the target of a remotely similar prosecution, suggesting racial bias. Federal prosecutors have dismissed this claim as outrageous and illogical, noting that race played no role whatsoever in the decision to seek the charges contained in the indictment. As the trial progresses, Diddy's defense team continues to employ a comprehensive strategy to dismantle the prosecution's case. The outcome will hinge on the jury's assessment of the evidence, the credibility of witnesses, and the effectiveness of the legal arguments presented by both sides. This case has significant implications not only for Diddy's future, but also for the broader conversation around power dynamics and accountability in the entertainment industry. If you found this deep dive informative, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more bold, no-nonsense breakdowns of today's biggest legal and celebrity stories.